Today I'm finally bringing you our first Star Wars Unlimited deck profile on the channel, and this is the deck that, after playing many different decks at the start of the new Star Wars Unlimited Spark of Rebellion metagame, I finally settled on as being one of the most fun ones to play that has a ton of game against the meta in general. Aggro decks, control decks, you can play against them all. This is a deck that rewards player skill massively, good decision making, and has lots of room for your own tweaks. So don't take this list as like the only list of 50 cards to play. I'll talk about a few things you can slip in here and there, and you can certainly make your own adjustments, especially for your own personal metagame. So let's take a look at our green Command Thrawn deck. What's up everyone, it's Dan with Maindeck, and I am so excited to be able to start bringing you Star Wars Unlimited deck profiles. I've been playing the game a ton since release and have just been trying lots of different decks out. Haven't quite had one I was super happy with, and plus we were doing all sorts of rules videos and everything here, but I think it's time to finally start throwing my own deck ideas out there so you can take a look at these, make your own adjustments, decide what you like and what you dislike. I am not going to say this is the top tier optimal version of playing Command Thrawn today, and none of my profiles are really going to be that way. Because instead I recognize that the metagame is constantly shifting and your own local metagame may be different, so you should be making decisions in your deck building that reflect the decks you expect to play against. Now, this is my version of green Command Thrawn that has been very effective for me. I really enjoy this and it works quite well against our local metagame in general. We have a lot of mid-range decks running around, and this is quite able to keep up with them and often kind of deny them some of the advantages they're trying to gain in the mid game and just take the game to that late stage where it is then going to be effective. I'm going to say here too, I don't have a sideboard posted here. I'll tell you some cards that I'm currently playing in sideboard, but I think you should tweak your sideboard based on what you expect to see. So I'm not including that in here right now. So let's jump right in the deck. We're going to go through a few things just for the people who aren't familiar with the game. Grand Admiral Thrawn is our cunning leader, and he is very, very fun to play at. But you have to remember this. It's very easy to forget. At the start of every action phase, you get to look at the top card of each player's deck, and that happens whether he's on the leader side or the unit side, and has an action on the leader side, which is you can pay 1 and exhaust him, then reveal the top card of any player's deck, exhaust a unit that costs the same as the revealed card or less. When he's on his deployed unit side, he has that ability, but it's on attack instead of having to pay 1. So you simply attack with him, then reveal a card and exhaust something that costs the same or less. Importantly, when Thrawn's on the unit side, he's a 3/9, and he is an Imperial official. So he's got a massive body. He is pretty obnoxious to take down, can usually get some damage on some things as your opponent tries to take him out, or sometimes your opponent will just ignore him. And if they do that, that's actually pretty sweet for you. That's pretty good. The fact that he's official will come up in just a bit, but the key to playing this deck in general is that we're just going to be using this knowledge of our opponent's deck and our upcoming cards to our advantage as much as possible, trying to exhaust things strategically with Thrawn to either prevent damage or prevent certain effects from going off. And especially one thing to keep in mind with this is that you can exhaust your opponent's super laser technician, which often is being played so that it can attack into something, be defeated, and then become a resource for your opponent. If you can predict that coming in, for example, the Boba Green decks, you're able to exhaust that super laser and put your opponent a turn behind of where they kind of want to be in ramp-wise, which is just really, it's buying you that extra turn, which is what you're trying to do with this deck. Really, you're trying to bide your time as much as possible, control the board, control your opponent's damage, get to the point where you get to the late game, drop Vaders, drop Walkers, drop Star Destroyers, and take control of the game at that point. So we are playing Energy Conversion Lab here as well, because Energy Conversion Lab is kind of insane and gives us several ways to just drop units and deal a bunch of damage to stuff on board with ambush. And we also have some other ways of ambushing, but it goes along nicely. We play a few in particular 5-drops that allow us to answer problematic cards on the board. Generally want to save your Energy Conversion Lab for when you really, really need it. You will know there will be times that Luke Skywalker Legendary drops. There's your opponent's leader is lethal to Steadfast Battalion, or Steadfast Battalion is lethal to your opponent's leader, I mean to say. You want to have those cards ready at that moment and then use the Conversion Lab to take those out. Don't get too excited about Conversion Labbing stuff, especially your own Super Laser Technician early on. We're going late. It's not a big deal. You have time. So, looking at the basic cards on our list now, one thing you may notice is that in my main board here, I'm very low on 2-drops, actually, very low on turn 1 plays in general, and that is an intentional choice. Whether or not that is an incredibly good choice, I think has yet to be determined over a long period of time and a lot of play, but I think I've been pretty happy with this. What I ultimately decided was that there's a lot of 2-drops in the game that just aren't super impactful. They aren't currently doing a lot. When you drop them, they don't have the stats to really make sense. We don't even have any 2-drop space units because, you know, if your opponent's playing aggressively in space, we're just going to use Thrawn's ability to control them until we can get down an overwhelming barrage or something. And we do have some space units that can kind of control space once we get to that stage. So we're going to heal some damage with Yularen. We're going to ramp up, and we're just going to barrage them or something and try and deal with their space that way. Instead, I just wanted to play 2-drops that are useful. So we have 3 Viper Probe Droid, which is just a solid unit for trading and lets us look at our opponent's hand. It's quite good in Thrawn because getting that hand knowledge will be useful for setting up Chimera or just to add on to your knowledge you might already have of the cards they've been drawing. Colonel Yularen is one of the stars of the show in this deck. He's a workhorse. He's an official, which is going to turn on Emperor's Royal Guard. He is a 2/3, which are okay stats. Doesn't kill things, but he's usually a little more annoying to take out. And he heals 1 when you play him, and then every other time you play a command unit, which as you see is most of the units in the deck, you're going to heal 1 as well. So he can just stack up and keep you alive against those aggro decks when the game is going a little too tight, a little tighter than you'd like. Admiral Piet at 3 in here as well as our last 2-drop. Piet is awesome in here. Piet is sometimes underrated by the opponents. They don't realize just how good he's going to be, but Admiral Piet has triggers off of 4 things, but Vader doesn't really matter, but he allows you to ambush with your Reinforcement Walker, your Gladiator, and Chimera. Reinforcement Walker is what you want to see every single game. It is insane. When you ambush it with Piet, you get its when played trigger, then you ambush, you get the on attack trigger as well. So you're going to be either drawing multiple cards or healing up to 6 or some mix of those. And then it still is a 6/9 that the opponent has to do something about, and they're going to want to attack Piet, but they have to get rid of the Walker first, so the Walker is going to get value, so then Piet lives another turn, and then you can drop another Walker. Things just get really good for you really fast. He's an official, which means the Royal Guard is going to gain Sentinel as well when he's in play. Royal Guard is stat-wise the best 3-drop Sentinel in the game right now, 3/4 with Sentinel. We don't have any Palpatine, so he's never going to be a 3/5, but still 3/4 Sentinel is very obnoxious for a lot of decks to take down, and even better when you play him with General Veers, another 3-drop. We have a lot of 3-drops in here, but I'll explain why in a sec. Veers, another official that pumps up Imperial units. I wasn't playing him in here at first, but I did some tweaking to the deck, and I very much like him in here. He makes Grand Admiral Thrawn a little more lethal, actually. That 4 damage threshold is actually really nice to hit on Thrawn. And what I found too is that Overwhelming Barrage, honestly, this is going to sound weird to people, but Overwhelming Barrage was underperforming for me a little bit until I got Veers in there to shore up some stats. I find that Overwhelming Barrage on a 3-power unit for the 5 damage is not quite enough to get those big impactful plays you're looking to get from it, but getting Veers in there pumped up a ton. We have a ton of Imperial units in here where now suddenly we have a bunch more opportunity with Overwhelming Barrage to get that 6 damage barrage, which usually can kill multiple things a little more easily. And it's felt a lot smoother with the Veers in there. Plus Veers off of Vader lets Vader ambush for 6. When you hit it, you always resolve the when played first. When you resolve the when played, get Veers out, then he ambushes for 6, which is also great. And just does things like makes Threshold on like Rook a little more annoying. Piet is more annoying to take out. Yularen can live a little longer, and then Royal Guard becomes a 4/5 Sentinel, which is just that's really nuts. So Veers has been really good in here. Boba Fett, of course, we play in here now. If you're looking to play this in a budget version, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. You don't have to include Boba Fett. He's not essential to the deck. He's gonna be the best 3-drop that you can fit in there. But you are able to swap it out for some cell block guards or something. That's fine. That's not a huge deal. Something that just helps you shore up the aggro matchup. Now, Fett is better than just that. I'm not gonna be lying to you. I'm gonna be straight with you. If you have Fets, you should put Fets in, because Fett off of Energy Conversion Lab is a way to deal with a lot of leaders immediately. As soon as the leader attacks, you can use Energy Conversion Lab to play Fett. Fett will get the on-attack trigger because the leader does not enter play that turn. It was in play already. So it's going to get the 3 damage from Fett's on attack trigger and then 3 damage from Fett, and that's going to take a lot of leaders out and not even die in return. We have a lot of like 4-6 leaders that won't kill Fett, but Fett can ECL into them for lethal, which is really sick. But otherwise, Fett obviously works super well with Thrawn's ability to exhaust. You can set up some really clean defeats with him, but Fett dies all the time. Your opponent's just going to immediately try and get rid of Fett. So, you know, it's like they do that because he's so good, obviously, and he's just going to become a magnet for removal. But it means if you don't have Fetts, you can play some other things that are magnets for removal, like Sentinels, and it's going to be similar in some games. So I would say, as far as budget version, don't worry about Fett as much if you're trying to keep this on a budget. Now, Super Laser Technician, do worry about that. You need 3 of that in here. We also run 3 resupply because we want to, ideally, and the reason we have so many 3-drops here too, is you really want to be on turn 2 playing a Super Laser, and on turn 3, Super Laser and resupply gets you to 6 resources and then allows you to play Thrawn immediately if it's useful to you, which it often is. The amount of games you can get Super Laser and resupply into your late game is going to directly correspond, I think, to a lot of games that you win when you're playing into a slower metagame with a lot more control and mid-range decks. So really, it's essential to try and aggressively mulligan in those matchups for cards like Super Laser and Resupply, and ideally both if you can. I have a lot of hands that I've kept where it's like Super Laser, after I put down my resources, Super Laser, Resupply, Piet or Yularen or something, and then a late game like Vader or Walker. That is a great 4-card hand to start with. And my opponents have Viper Probe Droided me and seen them go, okay, I know what's happening. Like, yep, we're going late and I'm going to get this Walker down and it's not going to be great for you. So it's insane. We obviously just want to try and get to the late game as soon as possible here so that we can really start controlling the game. We play 2 Rook and 2 Steadfast Battalion. I'm going to go over both at the same time because Rook is the card that you want to ECL in order to take out your opponent's large non-leader units. Keep in mind you can use the Shielded and the Ambush from ECL in whichever order is preferable to you. If the unit would kill Rook, you put the Shielded first. If the unit he's attacking would not kill Rook, often you want to take the damage on Rook first and then put the shield on because he'll survive a little more that way. So that Rook is for non-leader units, and then Steadfast Battalion is what you want to use when your opponent has leaders that you need to take out. You want to deploy Thrawn a little carefully with that, just to make sure you don't lose your Thrawn, because you're only going to get the on-attack trigger onto the Steadfast Battalion. If you're not aware, you use ECL to ambush Steadfast Battalion. If your leader's in play, you resolve the on-attack trigger to give the Steadfast Battalion +2/+2, which means it gets to ambush for a 7 damage overwhelm, which is really useful for taking out 7 health leaders, or just any leaders. You get to overwhelm then too. So that's the ideal place. So just be careful with your Thrawn, but with Thrawn's 9 HP base, it's not too hard to put him out there and keep him around for a turn cycle so you can get that Steadfast Battalion to be played. Now Vader's at 3 here, of course, and Vader is the one, if you are playing on a budget, I would try and get Vader's if you can. Vader changes the game. Having Vader versus not having Vader is going to directly affect your win percentage quite a bit too. Vader has a lot of really sweet hits in here. Vader into Veers is sick for ambushing for even more damage. Vader into Royal Guard is often, with the number of officials you have, often going to be a Sentinel. Vader into Fett. Whoa, I mean, that's so much threat on the board immediately. And even things like Vader into Piet, Vader into Yularen, those are not too bad either. Yularen can then get you, that extra heal as well, and then can start stacking up some more heals on you. And, I guess Probe Droid's there too. But Vader is obviously just Vader. He's super good. He kills things. He puts more things into play. Reinforcement Walker. Wow, I have fallen in love with this card playing this deck. It is so good. 6/9 for 8 with when played / on attack. It's really that. It's the fact that it triggers on both that makes it so good. Against mid-range and control decks, it draws you more cards than they often can keep up with, which just gives you that advantage of having more endgame threats that the opponent has to deal with. Against aggro decks, it can start healing so much, especially if you can get it down with a Yularen in play or a Piet in play to get extra triggers or extra heals. It can be very difficult for them to take out and just start healing you massively while you're dealing with their board. It's just a super good card. I would not reduce this below 3 if you're tweaking this deck. I think this card is insane and is a necessary card in this deck for playing to this later game. We move under space units here. We have, you'll see we are not respecting space very much in this deck, but that is really because Thrawn is able to easily commit the aggressive space units, Falcons and red 3s and A-Wings. Those all get exhausted so easily by Thrawn. Because as you saw with our deck, we don't run a lot of 2-drops. We have mostly 3+, and we have a lot of high-end cards, which makes Thrawn super reliable in finding high-value cards to be able to commit any, or I can use a lot of different game terms, to exhaust anything on board, as well as being able to exhaust leaders is super doable in this deck because we have Vader at 7, we have Reinforcement at 8, we have Glad at 6, we have Chimera at 8. We have a lot of high-cost things that allow you to do some really powerful turns where the opponent deploys Vader and then you can activate Thrawn and immediately exhaust him, and now the opponent doesn't get their like really sick turn they were planning to get. Do the same thing with Boba Fett, guys. You can, if you have this, if you're able to see this on top, see the right card number on top, then your opponent plays Boba Fett, you just set up your turn so that as soon as they play Fett, you exhaust it, and then suddenly their turn is way less explosive than they want to be. That's how you gain advantage against these Boba Fett decks, prevent them from being as resource efficient as they normally are, and then take them out in the late game. So for space, though, we're running 2 Strafing Gunship. Strafing Gunship is an okay card that is able to kind of threaten space or threaten ground, so it's always just kind of useful. It's our only 4-drop in the deck, because a lot of the time, I think I meant to mention this earlier, a lot of the time, you know, when you are doing those turns where you're going Super Laser into Resupply, you have that extra resource up, which allows you to exhaust things on the opponent's board to just prevent yourself from taking more damage. So often that turn 4 is just not something you're planning to play a 4-drop on, but we have the Strafing Gunship in there as an option just because green space is not very good right now. Yellow has some decent space units, but I just felt like the Gunship, you know, was fairly useful in a lot of matchups, and when the opponent has no space, the Gunship is still a respectable card to play because it can actually start just dealing with aggro units on the ground without taking a lot of damage back in return. Gladiator I have a 2, and honestly, Gladiator isn't like, it's not like the greatest card in the world, but I like it in here because it hits a lot of numbers just right. Gladiator with Piet allows you to get an ambush with it, which is pretty strong. It gets Sentinel for the turn, or it gives any unit Sentinel. Importantly, it can give Thrawn Sentinel if you want to just take a bunch of hits on him. It can give things like Reinforcement Walker Sentinel, again, just to take hits, or give a Super Laser Sentinel if you want to be really cheeky. I don't know why you'd have a Super Laser out at that stage, but you could. And with Veers in play, it gets to be a 6/7, which is quite nice too, especially if you have that ambush on Piet, because that's hitting thresholds where it's able to take out things like Fett's Fire Spray. But often, you just play it, you hold down the fort for a turn. I still haven't gotten to do this, but you also have the cheeky play where you can Sentinel your opponent's unit to allow yourself to attack something else, getting around a Sentinel your opponent has. That's a cheeky play. That is something that'll probably happen once in a million, but it's good to know. It's good to know that it's there. The last space unit, we have 2 Chimera in here. I'm going to be honest, this could and probably should be Devastator. If the game is going to go that late, Devastator is the card you want. Chimera is tough to really get triggers on. It often gets vanquished. It gets waylaid. Your opponent's going to do stuff to get rid of it so that Shielded doesn't actually come up as often as you'd want it to. But again, you can ambush with Piet, which is really useful with that shield and getting that on attack trigger right away, so it is pretty cool. You can, using Probe Droid or using Waylay, you can know exactly what's in your opponent's hand, so you can make sure to name the right things, or you'll know because you saw them draw a Palpatine earlier and you know they're going to want to play the Palpatine, they're holding on to it. You can guess pretty well with just your basic knowledge as well. But mostly it's in here because this is Thrawn's deck. And I felt like I couldn't take the Chimeras out. You got to have some Chimeras in there. So we have 2 Chimeras in there, but it's a decent way to just put an endgame threat in the late game as well. And having high cost cards again is really good. Same with Gladiator for being able to flip the high values on Thrawn so you can exhaust leaders with him. And then onto our events, we have 3 shoot first because that lets you shoot first and kill lots of things. It's super good with tons of units, especially Rook and Steadfast Battalion and Reinforcement Walker for killing huge things. Again, that threshold of getting to 6 damage with Gladiator allows it to take out Fett's Fire Sprays. There's tons of reasons. Shoot first is just really good for dealing stuff on the board. Resupply, already talked about that. You want to ramp as much as possible. Waylay is in here because it is super good against lots of stuff, lots of late game stuff, dealing with Fett's fire sprays. If your opponent is playing Palpatine, Waylay allows you to bounce the unit he steals back to your hand, which is super, super nice. And it can get rid of Sentinels when your opponent's trying to hold down the fort at the end of the game as you're going for the closer. It's just a useful card. Overwhelming Barrage needs no introduction. It gives a +2/+2 to something and then lets you deal a ton of damage across the board, divided to whatever you want. Like I said earlier, it's not actually as insane as you want it to be when everything has like 3 power max, but that's why Veers is in here. And when you get it on your late game plays like Reinforcement Walker, or Steadfast Battalion, or Vader, or a Gladiator, then it gets to be a serious amount of damage. That's quite good. Traitorous. One of Traitorous, and sometimes it's just clutch. Your opponent's playing Grand Moff Tarkin or something, they stack a bunch of experience counters on something, and then you just take it with Traitorous, and then it's like it wins the game on its own when it's good. It's just a one of in there, certainly can be swapped out if it is not useful for whatever's in your sideboard. And I'll just mention a few cards that I have played in the sideboard that I like quite a bit. I like Change of Heart against Emperor Palpatine again, because Change of Heart allows you to permanently take back the unit he steals, because at the end of the turn it goes back to its owner's control. It's also just very good against other decks going late to take their endgame threats and then use them against them. I like Devastator in here when you're going into control, as I already mentioned, because you want to have the bigger stick in the endgame, so you would swap out some of your early games. So you can swap out Yularians and stuff in those matchups, because it's just not useful when the game's going extremely late and you want to have more high-end drops to be able to commit to exhaust their high-end drops with Thrawn. And then I like playing things like Asteroid Sanctuary, possibly Cell Block Guard is an option if you want to play into aggro decks a little bit more. Sanctuary is awesome because it protects Royal Guard, it protects Boba Fett, it protects Veers, it protects Piet, it protects your key things and exhausts their units just to prevent early damage. Those are all really, really solid options, as is if you want the 7th Fleet Defender, which is a way just to fight in space a little more efficiently. It's usually something that against more space-heavy decks can trade with 2 of their units pretty effectively. It's another decent option as well. So take a look at all those. I should have put the cards on the screen here so you can see all those different options, and then there's plenty more that you can tweak based on whatever your meta is like and how you like it. But back to the deck itself, that is the main board. Those are the cards that I've liked the most after tweaking this deck a little bit. I think this deck is a ton of fun. I think if you like the idea of playing a more mid-range and control deck and want to just have all the knowledge, have all the control over the game, and have lots of outs to whatever you need, including doing things that no other deck can do, like exhausting Boba Fett, exhausting Super Laser Technician, so it has to take another turn before it is able to even become a resource unless you exhaust it again. You could exhaust it multiple turns in a row. And just having the advantage on your opponent even when they think they are playing they are usually playing into your trap. Very Thrawn-like, very thematic, and an extremely fun deck to play. Highly recommend this deck to you all, so I hope you give it a shot, and if you do, please let me know in the comments down below what you think of this deck in general, or when you play it, how it did for you, any changes you make to the deck, what makes the deck better in your opinion for your local metagame. I would love to hear from you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this deck profile. We will have more Star Wars Unlimited deck profiles coming in the future. I only like to do them when I have gotten significant experience playing a deck, so I can really talk about it. So they are going to be coming probably every 2 to 3 weeks in general. So we'll have a number of them out before we move on to set 2, but hope you guys do find them interesting to listen to all the same. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.